Good morning or good afternoon, and welcome to this month's Educators AI Playbook with myself, Mark Orchison, Dan Fitzpatrick, and Julia Pidduck. This episode is around AI decision paralysis, and we're experiencing lots of schools and school leaders really sort of working out what to do with AI. Dan, you've got a lot on this topic in terms of the engagement that you're having with school leaders. And what are you finding are the current key themes that school leaders are struggling with?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we've talked about this before on the podcast, but every year we do a big survey of everyone we've worked with for the previous year and everyone who kind of follows us on social media, the newsletter and all of that. And one of the big things we looked into this year was the leadership side of it. And we kind of uncovered that a lot of teachers, a lot of educators, a lot of administrators are they're using these tools. Some of the statistics that we're seeing around this from the United States, from the UK and beyond, is the majority of educators are using them. Now that's obviously going to be to a varying degree. But what we found was that a lot of people who answered the survey, and we had a few thousand educators there who answered it, found that they kind of know these tools. Okay, they might not be at the cutting edge, but they kind of know how these chatbots work. They are using them to do various things. They kind of get an idea of some of the risks around these. Obviously, this is very broad strokes, but that they seem to be stuck at a moment where they're now thinking, well, where do we go from here? Because it's very individual based. Or it might be starting to venture into enterprise level from, like, let's say a co-pilot license or something like that. But actually, where's the strategy behind it? And there seems to be a bit of decision paralysis, like you rightly say there, around, well, just where do we go with it? What decisions do we make about integrating this? And it seems to be a mix of leaders kind of not 100% sure because they don't feel they've got all the information. They don't feel like they can make a fully informed decision yet, and educators kind of waiting for a signal from above. That's the leadership's not from anywhere else, to give to move forward. So there seems to be that paralysis at the moment.
And we've got we've got a great guest on today, Mike Lubelfeld. He's a superintendent and author, and we'll come on is that in the next few parts. But I think he's got a really great story to tell, right, in terms of how he has approached within his school and a framework. I think everyone's going to be really interested to hear about.
Yeah, I think, and it kind of comes down to the fact that he's moved with it. He started to move with it. He started to try it out, and not being afraid to, within the risk limits of using this technology, not being afraid to trial some things, see and start to. And he talks about in that interview, doesn't he, about how he's literally coaching so he's a superintendent and he's coaching his sixth grade teachers in how to integrate this technology in the classroom. So yeah, it's quite inspiring.
The other side that you sort of touched upon, and Julia, welcome again to the episode, is that there are changing laws, right? There are changing requirements. Just in the past 6 weeks, in the past 3 weeks, we had in the UK an update to keeping children safe in education. It was a draft update, which, if you're not in the UK, it's a statutory requirement that you have to meet, and there are enhanced obligations around how you are monitoring the risks of AI. And Julia, this is not just happening in the UK, right? There are other countries, and I think that sort of realization of there are things that we can't just jump straight into, right?
Yeah.
There are other things that I think that are amplifying that sort of paralysis of what should we move with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of two-sided sword, as it were, because we've got this extra guidance coming through, and we're seeing it from education platform, education departments, government departments, and we're also seeing kind of frameworks, guidance come out at national levels that affect schools. Of course, we've seen like the EU AI Act, which affects schools as deployers of AI, and we're seeing it added to the curriculum. So we're talking about your interview with Mike, and we'll see more about that later on. But in embedding AI in the curriculum, we've seen places like Saudi Arabia and the UAE kind of develop that. So it gives us more guidance, and the school leaders, it gives you something to anchor to. But also, it's also kind of does contribute a little bit to that paralysis when you think, okay, how are we going to move forward, but also meet all of these requirements as well.
Interesting. Like Darren, last time when we ran this episode, it was just before BET, and BET is like one of the global edtech forums, and we met there. I had lots of different conversations with lots of different edtech businesses, and some of the big ones, Microsoft, Google, the ones that are the core system platforms. What I heard from those folk were that they were concerned from their just commercial model that people aren't consuming sufficient amount of Copilot licenses, or they're not consuming the sufficient depth of the Google AI licenses. So they're sort of seeing it on their revenue streams that they're not achieving the revenues that they anticipated, and they're sort of really thinking about how they engage with schools to get them using those AI tools to increase that consumption. And I don't know whether it's that AI is moving so fast that the planning cycles of schools are long, that it's very hard to react. But we're a couple of years in now from ChatGPT to where we are now with this products. What are you hearing from schools about why perhaps just some of these basic, I say Copilot is basic, or in general as basic, why those aren't being used to the extent that an ed tech firm or a big FANG might anticipate that should be used or consumed?
Yeah, I suppose, people might listen and might think, well, why do they have to use it? It's not like if it's a big tech company trying to force use of their product onto teachers. So I guess from the point of view, I'd like to probably answer that question from the point of view of the fact that the benefits of this technology. I guess how could we benefit from this technology? And I think it's really multifaceted from what I'm seeing. There's a lot of schools that just won't know what those benefits are. I think with a lot of new technology, you have maybe one or two excited faculty members, teachers, educators who are using this technology, but a lot of others might just like do the odd little thing, write an email with it or ask it a question, use it as Google, and therefore aren't seeing maybe some of the more anticipated benefits that comes with using a more enterprise level tool. And we were just talking, weren't we, before we went live, about Google updating some of their tools now, and we're seeing it across the board with lots of different large tech companies where this technology isn't just a chatbot anymore, but it can bring in documents from Drive, it can link to other tools, it can create workflows. I think awareness is one of the problems there, and we know how busy teachers are, like actually getting some time for awareness there. Secondly, professional development, actually. How do we use these tools? How do we use them? What's the best practice around them? If the awareness isn't there and we don't know, then the professional development isn't going to be forthcoming. And as somebody who's a senior leader in high schools, I know just how much demand there is on professional development time from many different areas. And sometimes AI use isn't the most important time to spend. So there's a lot of different factors there. Also, I think a lot of teachers who are using this are using personal accounts at home. They're using, and because that's what they've used from the start. They might have their own ChatGPT £20 a month subscription. They might have their own Gemini. They might be using free versions out there, and therefore they just don't naturally come into school and open up Microsoft Copilot because it's within their domain, or Gemini because it's within their school license. So I think it's varying factors there. I think it comes down to if we want the benefits of this, it's going to have to come from a leadership level. It's going to have to come from a workforce development level, and have to be strategic as well.
The other thing I want to just highlight from my discussions with like the big enterprise, Google, Microsoft, Apple, right? They have armies of companies and one-man bands who they pay to go into schools they always have these people, right, to go in and like train how to use an iPad, train how to use 365, and they get paid like $1,500 a day. And what we have seen because of these risks, their commercial risks, right, around consumption, they want the learners of today to be their buyers of tomorrow. So if they don't program people with using Copilot or Go or Gemini or whatever Apple are doing, right, it's going to be right. There's a risk to their future businesses. So what they're doing, right, is they're paying like nine. Like we've had people, they come to us like nine. Like, we'll give you $1,500 a day to go into school, and you just talk about the benefits of Copilot, or at a very practical pedagogical level, right? We don't do that sort of thing, but we could do that. But and then we send all these different people around schools to do that. And there's millions of dollars of money going into these programs, and I sort of fear that outside of the enterprise businesses, and we'd come on to like Einstein AI, but you've got Claude and you've got all these other ones. If the current companies that have the enterprise agreement with that school are then forcing in a very free way, because they're saying to school, like, we'll send trainers in, it's free, right? Training to use our products. Is that going to somehow add to this paralysis? Because you as a school leader going, right, I've got actually some products that are a lot better than the enterprise agreement products, but actually I've got free training from those enterprise companies, or I have to buy in someone else to give them money to do something that's not the enterprise company. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You reminded me of a quote. I don't know who said it, but I came across it's well known, but I came across it again on social media yesterday. Of if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, you've got to go together. And I think you remind me of that, because I think many of us are individually kind of at the cutting edge of this technology use, using something like Claude Co-work, which is a really effective agent, and probably one of the most cutting edge sides of the commercial side of individual AI use. However, as you know, because you're the guys who specialize in this, that we don't get guarantees for security and privacy and data, especially enterprise level or school organizational level when it comes to these tools. And actually, if we want to do this in a serious way, in a professional way, then we have to do it at that enterprise level. Julia can probably speak a lot more in depth on this than I can.
Interesting, like with Microsoft, they're like, their current metric, I think they are a bit further behind, is like, we are the most secure company when it comes to AI. And I was like, yeah, maybe the most secure, but AI is rubbish compared to everything else, right? So you can keep going on about that, but if you, as you say, if most educators are using their own personal accounts, they don't care about Microsoft and how secure they are. It's all about innovation and how I can do things that are better. And it sort of takes me on to the rise of this agentic AI, and you tell us a bit about the Einstein AI and what that can do, and then what happened, because I think it's a great story.
So it kind of goes back to January. So what we saw was, and I was reading a great analysis of this. What probably happened was a lot of high level professional white collar workers went home for Christmas, end of December, especially in the Western world, and we just realized how capable some of these AI tools are now, whereas they didn't have the time beforehand to delve deep. And so a lot of them started to figure out, actually, what could we use this for? What could we ask it to do? What are the limits of the capabilities? And so we started to get a lot of new agentic use cases and case studies around this. And then what happened in January was a developer launched an open source tool. It went through various names for lawsuits. I think it started off as Claude Bot. I can't remember what it's called now, but it was too close to Anthropic's Claude, so they threatened to sue, and then so they had to change the name. But essentially, what it was a bit of code you could put on a computer. You could therefore have your own agent on a computer. And what it saw was, I think it saw like a massive spike in people buying Mac Minis to run these off. And essentially an agentic AI. So agentic AI, in a very simple way, an AI that can run multi-step tasks, and it can figure out those steps by itself, and it can use tools to do it. So we started to get lots of kind of individual users of AI on social media talking about how they were setting this AI off to essentially run their life. A lot of hype, a lot of crazy YouTube videos about how this thing was going to make them millions of pounds because it was essentially running their businesses, running their lives. It was acting as a PA, acting as a developer, but with very little instructions. A lot of security issues when it comes to this. If you're just setting one of these off on your computer, it could have access to your passwords and so on. I suppose alongside that, we got Claude, so Anthropic's Claude, so a more robust, commercial, user-friendly agent with a lot more security set in there. Still can't be used in a school setting with sensitive data, but for the individual user, a lot more robust, which is having an amazing impact. I led a 2-hour workshop last night with some educators, and just to see what it could do was fantastic. But around that time, a graduate in the United States created something called Einstein AI. So it was based off this Claude bot. He'd used kind of that infrastructure to create this, but essentially an AI that could go into a learning management system called Canvas, which I'm sure most people around the world in education will be familiar with. I think over half of colleges in the United States use Canvas. But essentially, it was designed so it could go in there independently. It could watch lectures, it could digest course content, and then it could complete assignments. And this graduate marketed this tool as the AI that does college for you. And by that, he meant you don't, as the student, you don't have to have any input. You don't even have to open Canvas. It will literally go in and do college for you. Somebody owns the IP to the word Einstein. Not sure if it's Einstein's family or another company or whatever that might be, but essentially they issued a cease and desist, so it had to be pulled down. But I wrote, as you say, I wrote an article for Forbes pretty much saying that doesn't matter that it was pulled down, because it wasn't pulled down because of the capability, because of the, I suppose, the cheating element of this. It was just the IP of the name. This will reappear in thousands and thousands of different guises, and already is starting to. So yeah, it very threatening towards some educational systems, especially educational systems that are quite one-dimensional, where you go on, consume content digitally, and then complete an assignment. I think those types of educational systems are going to have a big rethink of how they structure their provision.
For most schools, isn't that, waiting for that structure to change? You can't just sit around because you've got these products, right? And you need, surely, you need to start thinking. I think when that you've raised around, how do you have students demonstrate the thinking process through the process of assignments, and to restrict the fact that these products can do everything that is required to get, the top grades.
Yeah. I think, I think sometimes we talk about using AI as almost like a vending machine. We put in what we want out of it, and it gives us something back, which isn't always amazing. Let's be honest. However, I can't help but think a lot of corners of education around the world have been treating their educational provision a bit like a vending machine, right? Here's some
Yeah.
content, consume that content, learn it, and then regurgitate that information within an essay, within an exam, within an
Yeah.
assignment, whatever that might look like. And then that's how we'll measure your progress, and you get a nice certificate at the end if you pass a certain threshold. I just think this technology is kind of rendering that type of provision impossible. I want to say
Yeah.
irrelevant as well, but I think just impossible to deliver. And I think we're really going to have to think about this. And I probably mentioned it on these webinars before, but I like to think of us moving towards an educational assessment system where we're considering not just the final product, but we're considering the process and the performance of that
Mm.
knowledge as well. And by that I mean the application of it.
Many school leaders at the moment will be going through the planning process for the next academic year. And then, get the end of June, July, people are on vacation, and then come back in September, and you're picking up the plans that you're delivering. But just between now and August, September, the technology is going to change so much that, as a school leader, how do you think they should be preparing for how you're going to use AI for the next academic year, noting that it's changing so much? And I think that, you recently picked up or wrote about Sam Altman and around the direction of travel, and that, institutions are adapting more slowly, and we've recognized that, as at the very, very beginning, Microsoft and Google with their license over recognizing that things are moving too slowly, but technology is moving so fast, faster than it's ever done. But how do you plan to accommodate this stuff in terms of the management structures that you as a school need to have in place to manage the school, right? If all these things, what do you think? What do you think school leaders can be doing
Yeah.
operationally with their colleagues?
For me, I think it's two pronged, and I talk about this a lot in a lot of my strategy work around linear innovation and non-linear innovation. I think linear innovation is essentially how do we continue in the system that we're already in, but maybe improve it, get a little bit better. And I think we need to address policy.
Yeah,
It's really interesting because I don't know about you, but sometimes I forget how much of a bubble I'm in when it comes to this. And I just kind of naturally assumed, because of some of the organizations I work with, I guess, that everyone's got a policy on this, or at least something embedded in another policy at the moment around this. And I was doing I think a couple of Fridays ago, I was speaking to about 100 head teachers in the UK at a conference, and it was almost, I'd addressed the talk to be almost like beyond policy towards strategy.
yeah.
And I quickly just said, "Can I get a hands up who's got a policy around this?" And out of 100, probably 4 or 5 put their hand up. And I suddenly realized that the talk I was about to give was probably a bit premature. So I had to step it back a little bit. And I think we've got to look at this. I think we've got to look at first of all having policy for safety, because, like we've already mentioned, you might have those rogue teachers who are using their own £20 a month ChatGPT license at home, or a free license as well, where they can't control what the AI trains, what data you're giving it, and the AI trains on. And I think just to give those teachers a better outlet of AI, first and foremost, in a safe way, we need to look at that. But then also we need to move to our actually pedagogical policies as well, because AI is, and I talk about this a lot, but it's not a technical issue. I mean, it is on one side of the coin, but the other side of the coin, it's a leadership opportunity, and because it infiltrates everything, absolutely everything. And one of those areas that we're finding it infiltrating faster than probably others is assessment,
Yeah.
because it's such an easy alignment with getting AI to do work for you. So I think we need policies around that, and that might be at the moment a bit of a harsh policy that just goes, look, we're not accepting it for work. We're not accepting it because we're in systems that I would argue anyway are becoming more and more out of date. But we still need to kind of protect the integrity of that system, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, I think we need to look at the non-linear innovation, which is how do we create the future? Because just doubling down on the current way of doing things in a world that is making the current way of doing things a bit more irrelevant and a bit more impossible to achieve, we need to start looking at, well, how might we redesign assessment? And that's going to be difficult because we've got exam systems around us.
Yeah.
That vending machine style of exams still exists, and that's a
which is also like
industry.
Apologies, like a protectionist racket, right?
I mean, I was trying to go about it in a sensitive way, but okay. Say it how it is, Mark.
But like it is, like they don't want people to change and move away from there because every exam is $200 or whatever it is, right? And they ain't gonna like they're probably going, crap, how is our business model being fundamentally undermined, right?
Yeah. And so it's a house of cards. It's you start moving one card and think, actually, could we innovate here? And the system of education starts to fall, and people, like you say, have got massive vested interest in that system not falling. Yeah. So it's difficult, but I think as educators on the ground, as leaders on the ground, our students have still got to walk into an exam hall at the end of their time with us, but what could we do in between? How could we supplement that? How could we look at formative styles of assessment rather than summative styles of assessment in order to innovate and try and, as well as stay within the current system that we're forced to currently, also try to prepare our students for the world as it is, not maybe as we'd like it to be.
Yeah, I saw a question from, I think it was Natasha, put something around, do we need an AI policy, and it's about policy. Now, I was racing here. We are, Julia is leading on a 3-part navigating the AI frontier training workshop. Julia, it starts next week, right?
Yes, week? Tuesday the 24th is the first session.
I'll ask one of the team if they put a link to it into the chat now. If you've not heard about it, they're registered, but we've got 545 schools registered for this navigating. We're doing it in partnership with the Association, AAIE, and the Council of International Schools. And part of that is where we give you a template AI strategy. And AI strategy is basically 12 questions, really 2 pages. And it's a SWOT analysis of how AI could impact your school. Really simple: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and what we are going to do to govern the SWOT of AI. And that goes into then policy, and the policy around AI is then managed by the diamond of a group of roles: safeguarding, IT, would you remind me, academic, and privacy, right? And we haven't got time to touch on this today, but the stuff's in the chat there, and it's free to attend. And we go through the practical steps and give you loads of resources to go and do that sort of stuff. But yeah, policy is really, really important, and register for that if that's of interest to you. And Julia, maybe you touch upon some of the topics when after we've sort of heard from Mike. And with that, I think it's quite right actually that we bring the interview with Mike into play. So Dan, if you just give us an overview of Mike, where he's from, backgrounds, what he's currently doing, and then we can hear from him.
Yeah, really simple. Mike's a superintendent of schools in the greater Chicago area in Illinois. Great guy, great personality, and he writes books around leadership, and especially leadership within turbulent, changing times.
Brilliant. So let's hear from Mike. Here we go.
I'm so excited to be joined by Mike Lubelfeld. Mike, I've known Mike for a while through LinkedIn, and it's great to be able to connect with you, Mike. Mike is the author of a brand new book, Leading for Tomorrow's Schools Today, with his co-author, Nick Polyak. And he's a superintendent, and he's literally in the classroom right now. Mike, thank you for joining us on the webinar.
Dan, I'm a huge fan, a longtime listener, first-time caller, as they say. It's really cool to see the great work you're doing. I've been inspired by your writing. I've been inspired by your speaking. So it's really fun to come to you live from Northwood Middle School in Highland Park, Illinois, just north of Chicago. I'm in a sixth grade classroom as we speak.
That's amazing. Thanks so much for giving up your time, Mike. Mike, as an educational leader, as a superintendent, as somebody who's deeply interested in this field of artificial intelligence, are we overreacting here? Is AI kind of is it a bit of a balloon that's going to pop, or is this something that we should take seriously as educational leaders?
So I really appreciate the question. I believe it's something we should take very seriously. I believe it's kind of like a balloon in the movie Up, where we're going to travel up, to a new place. I've been in public education since the 90s, and I was a teacher when the internet went public in the mid 90s, and that was transformative. And I remember the old video clip from the Today Show where I think it was Bryant Gumbel or Greg Gumbel was saying, the internet, this is never going to take off. Well, yeah, it did. Again, good, bad, and otherwise. I believe generative artificial intelligence possesses the suite of technological tools, Dan, that will allow us to individualize education for each teacher and each student globally. And I do believe that we're on the the tip of the toothpick here, and as interested in it as I am, and as much as I'm studying, I still feel like I know nothing. And I use it and I understand it and I study it, and I can't wait one day to learn even more. And I do believe this is the great empowerer of our generation. And here in the US, we say that Horace Mann helped us influence our public schools to make it the great equalizer of the social machine. Every generation does better. And I would say globally, this suite of technology will allow us to do that. I think it is here forever. Amazing.
And I know you're deeply interested as a school leader in leadership, in actually the people who now whose task it is to get us into this new era and to lead us in this new era. What do you think leadership looks like in this AI world?
It's messy. It is like a squiggly line because it's not linear. It's beyond spatial. And I think it's actually exciting. I've got something where I joke, but it's not really a joke. I have a tolerance for ambiguity when it comes to systems and structures. And when I was a classroom teacher, it drove some of my students crazy. I taught 8th grade many years ago, and they were like, no, I need to know, when is it due? How many pages? And I'm the guy that's like, I want to see if you've mastered it. And if it takes you, 3 days, that's cool. And I don't know, what do you think? How long should it be? Some people thrive in that. A lot of people don't. Leadership is figuring out the context of the system and the organization and creating the conditions that allow thriving to go on. So I hope that's not too ambiguous.
No, I get it. And I suppose as people who work with educational leaders, I don't know how you find, but I find that we're kind of, now that we're like 3.5 years into kind of having generative AI around us, I feel like there's a lot of teachers, a lot of educators have tried it. They kind of see what it's about. They kind of know what it's about. They see some of the benefits, they see some of the risks, but it's almost like we're waiting on now leadership to go, right, this is something we should look at an organizational level, and that's happening in some places. But I feel like there's almost like a bit of paralysis of decision making when it comes to leadership at the moment. Are you seeing that at all?
I am. And it's really insightful and very astute for you to notice that. It's, oh my gosh, there might be name the concern, environmental impact. Yes, legit concern. So therefore we're going to stop. Well, that wouldn't be my advice. There might be a hallucination effect because some people don't necessarily understand that the output is based upon the input and the training model and how that works. So they're going to say hallucination can't do it. Well, I don't believe in that. Some say, oh, it's cheating. Well, Stanford University has disproved that generative artificial intelligence has yielded greater cheating than simply humanity in and of itself in questionable ethics and morals. So I say, aside from looking at all of the deficits that exist, and deficits do exist, my approach is look at the assets. What are the positives? How can we tease out our greater knowledge and understanding and then apply to it? How do we go to old Benjamin Bloom's domain on the cognitive level, understanding and comprehension, then application analysis, then synthesis and evaluation. Nick Poliak and I are two knuckleheads from Chicago. We penned a few books, Dan, and we've got a leadership framework where we think can be applied to things like this.
Amazing. And what is that framework? Take us through it. What can we learn from it?
So based on over 60 years of work as superintendents, both Nick and I are public school all the way, we've come up with the Change Leadership Framework, which literally is elegance and simplicity. We'll take all the letters of the word change. C is challenge the status quo. It doesn't mean change automatically. It means challenge the status quo. If the status quo is cool, stick with it. H is have open conversations, and people in positions like mine need to listen more than we speak. The open conversation is be open to being wrong. CHA is adapt and be flexible, because what the leader may think is right is oftentimes not completely right. So be open. The N is navigate obstacles. I don't care if we're in Scotland, if we're in Chicago, if we're in Australia, if we're in Ghana, wherever we are, there's going to be obstacles. Let's navigate them together. G is generate a shared vision. Why do we wait to the 5th step in a 6-step change framework to generate a shared vision? Well, we think that we don't always know the vision, and we should generate it by getting input from our people, all people, those who are going to be impacted and those who are going to be doing it. And then E is our most favorite, enjoy the journey. Because there's joy in it. And again, look at the assets. So we believe that change is necessary. We also believe that we don't change for change's sake. And we believe we can follow this framework to actually tease out things like this in this Gen AI world as well.
Yeah, and I am with you there. I think that idea of change is going to be so important, and being able to deal with that. And sometimes I find, and as somebody who's been on leadership teams in schools and colleges, and I feel like sometimes we very easily focus on the managerial skills of our leaders, and I suppose we've had to do that for a long time. We've got to keep things ticking. We've got huge organizations that need to be managed on a day-to-day basis, and that's quite complex. And I feel like what we're missing, and this is speaking in very broad strokes, obviously, sure, but what we're missing at the moment is those types of leaders who are more entrepreneurial, or more open to what I call constructive deconstruction, being able to actually go, why are we doing that again? Why did 20 years ago we decide that was best practice? And is that going to work over the next few years as AI becomes more and more common? Yeah, do you think we're going to have to start, I suppose, promoting different types of people, or can we develop these entrepreneurial skills within our leaders? I'd love to get your take on that.
So it's funny, as a guy in lower ed, I've been pre-K grade 8 my whole career. So ages 3 to 14, right? I can't get out of the 8th grade. I would say that it literally starts in our elementary and middle schools here. And the answer is yes. Are we teaching those skills that I'll call our cornerstone or foundational skills? I won't call them hard skills or soft skills. They're cornerstone and foundational. Critical thinking, collaboration, a little bit of humor, right? Let's have some fun, joyous. And also, let's learn stuff. I still believe you should memorize. I think you need to be able to read and write and have numeracy skills in order to be successful. The key here is, not everybody's going to be lockstep. So I'll say entrepreneurial is also individualistic. And even here in our own little organization, 550 employees, 4,000 kids, no teacher is required to use generative artificial intelligence. My question is, if you're not sure why, let's talk about it. And if you want to use it, what's been good or bad? Let's have the conversations. But the key is test it out a little bit. Let's experiment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you, as there'll be school leaders watching this and thinking about AI with their faculty and trying to get it implemented at that level, you're literally taking it into the classroom as well. I mean, you're literally today you're with 6th graders, aren't you? Can you give us an insight into how you're working with 6th graders around AI?
Yeah, so I'm blessed with opportunity. I'm a Google GSV fellow and I was a Generation AI ISTE ASCD fellow, which is amazing. So I got these cool opportunities. I also have some of the most amazing and open-minded teachers anywhere. So in the fall, I was working with some fourth grade teachers and students and some eighth grade teachers and students. And a sixth grade teacher said, "Hey, I'm wondering, would you mind like teaching a lesson to my kids? And how would this fit in social studies or anything?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Are you interested in a little bit more?" And he said, "Well, what are you offering?" And so we went back and forth on email. And I said, let's do some concierge PD. And I'm here for 10 lessons over about 8 weeks with a partner from PlayLab AI. And we are teaching sixth grade students and my sixth grade teacher colleague what it is to be literate and fluent in this emerging world. What is a large language model, and why is a large language model trained on patterns of data, and how do those patterns of data work? And we have the kids doing hands-on interactive engagement. Today we did what I'll call a human Mad Lib, where we had the kids had a word bank. They were the AI model. They were limited to that word bank as the corpus of their data, and the other kids were the humans, and they had to ask questions. The responses were restricted to the word bank in an effort to feel and live and experience how and why a large language model responds and reacts the way it does, and even if it sounds confident. The bottom line is the children are going to produce apps using the PlayLab AI format and framework that are related to the teacher's content, because that's our world. And our teacher asked me for it. I'm pumped that I'm able to do it. And I've got partners and cool folks like you, Dan, who are doing this work where we can actually just drop in and see what it's all about.
Amazing. I love the fact that you're not just leading from the top, Mike, but you're getting your hands dirty and getting into the classroom. It's inspiring and amazing to see. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. And if anyone wants to get your book or find out more about your work, where can they go?
So you can go to Bloomsbury Academic Press, Bloomsbury Publishing, and you can also go to Amazon. So Nick Poliak and I have written 5 books, and we'd love to share it with you. We like to unlearn, stay unfinished, and lead for tomorrow. Dan, thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And just to remind everyone, that book is Leading for Tomorrow's Schools Today. Go check it out. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Dan.
What an inspirational chap.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's good. I love the fact that he's in the classroom. He was literally, you could see it behind him. He was in the classroom as he was talking to me, and spending time with his teachers, with his grade 6 students, so young students, 10 years old, and really helping them on the ground.
The word bank exercise, having the kids become their own LLM, restricted to words they've been given, and then other kids asking them the questions. Have you come across that before? Have you seen many schools do that sort of activity to really help their students understand what an LLM is and how it works?
Yeah, not to that extent. No, I've seen maybe with older kids, and but not with kids that young. It was, yeah, like you said, it was inspirational.
And the change model, how do you feel that other schools, people watching this, can take away Mike's change model and apply it to their circumstances?
Yeah, I think, you know what, as Mike was telling me about his change model, I was thinking this is what we need. I think we need, and I think I said it in the recording of the interview there about how I think as leaders, especially at kind of a head teacher, principal level, we do get bogged down in the day-to-day of the managing of the organization, and rightfully so, because there are fires that have to be put out every single day as a leader of a school. But I think how do we build the capacity? How do we maybe we have to raise up other leaders and maybe trust them a bit more so that we can build back a bit of capacity. Principals can build that capacity to maybe spend time with other principals and or have some time to look at that kind of, like what I was saying before, that not non-linear innovation, that creating the future, that thinking about, like Mike, the 6th grade teacher, has got their curriculum, they're working through it, they're doing their job, and maybe the superintendent, the principal could actually design something for those students and step into the classroom and help with that kind of thing. Yeah, it's a pressure. I think that's the hard bit about this. It's an extra external pressure on us as schools when things are already really tight. But I think if we think about leadership as not just managerial, but as entrepreneurial, as people who actually it is within our power sometimes to try and deconstruct those practices and try and win a bit more capacity or resource back to help us think about the future a bit more.
I think there's a whole range of ideas. Anyone watching that interview with Mike is going to be inspired and take away lots of practical stuff in there. And I've already seen some comments of asking people whether we'll be sharing the recording. Yes, this recording will be shared afterwards. But I really do I think there's a lot there. And, as you described with Mike, he's a school leader, but he's getting his hands dirty to really understand the risks, the limitations, the opportunities, and then taking his organization forward collectively and understanding that. I love his analogy, the squiggly line. It's a squiggly line, right? And we just want to do it in a way that is fun and have fun along the way.
Yeah, I think what he's doing as well, Mark, is like coming back to what we were talking about earlier. Is by him. Because it is, we're talking about paralysis of permission. Like permission isn't just necessarily a leader going, yes, go and do that, but actually him being in the classroom, him kind of living that value of that change model, is given permission to his students and to that 6th grade teacher to carry on trying things out, to carry on being creative, and using artificial intelligence. So I like how that given of permission isn't just words. It's the example that the leader gives as well.
Yeah, great. Yeah, definitely. Julia, we're gonna move on to sort of what is going on in the world of regulation, privacy, themes, those sorts of things. What is it that you've seen over the past few weeks that schools are dealing with, that we're seeing, restrictions that maybe are causing a bit of paralysis, and what do you feel that schools can be doing to move themselves forward?
Yeah, there's a few things happening. So as I mentioned earlier on, we're seeing these education department standards and expectations coming. So we've seen that in places like the UK, like you mentioned, Australia. And then we've also got curriculum, we've also got regulations. So we're starting to see our AI suppliers, our AI developers catching up with that a little bit. And one of the things that we've seen is they're not always ready, when it comes to things like education department standards. Those are not things like regulations that are put out there for a long time before they're implemented. So what we're seeing is, rather than them trying to kind of move everything and fit to these standards that are publishing, they're starting to benchmark what already exists against those standards. And that's really, really useful. But when we're thinking about global audience, which we are, and of course, I work with schools all around the world, have to be really careful, because when these products are marketing themselves, they're saying things like, we are in line with this standard, we meet the requirements of this standard, and those standards are really different all around the world. So they're kind of aligning themselves a lot to the regions that matter most to them commercially, or where we're seeing like the strongest regulatory pressure. So they might be saying we're approved, we're aligned, but that's not always necessarily true when we've got a global market that's evolving at different speeds in different places. So it's understanding that a little bit more and having a bit more of an understanding of what that actually means when they're kind of marketing themselves in that way. So in terms of regulation, I think that's one of the things that we need to sort of be aware of. It's brilliant that we're seeing the response from our AI developers and our AI producers, but we also need to be aware of how that's working around the world, and whether it meets our own requirements. Just because it meets something here, does it meet what we need? So there's certainly that when it comes to regulation. And then kind of thinking about the topics that we talked about today, this kind of paralysis moving forward, how we do that, how our school leaders do that. I wanted to touch a little bit on the things that we talked about in terms of individual use, because I don't think we're ever thinking about, should we move forward with AI, because it's already happening, right? Dan, Mike, Mark, you've all talked about the fact that this is already happening. We're in the middle of an AI kind of gold rush. And I see it all the time because I'm looking at these vendor websites a lot. I'm looking at the products. And the thing I see a lot that bugs me a little bit is sign up free now. So everyone's marketing themselves to educators, marketing themselves to teachers. And you can just sign up at the click of a button. Just give us your email address, go ahead and use our service. So when we're thinking as leaders, we need to be thinking about that shadow AI that's being used in the school, those personal accounts, and that personal use. And it's like, how do we herd all of that, right? How do we create that into something that's cohesive, that is structured, that meets our strategy and meets our objectives and meets our mission statements of schools and things like that. So it's having that kind of clarity, making sure people understand their expectations around appropriate use, defining what that appropriate use is, and making sure we have things like governance committees in place, literacy training. We're talking about individual members of the teams at the schools understanding what they're doing with AI and what that AI can do and what the possibilities are and what the impact of that might be. And making sure we're implementing like policy that aligns with our strategy. And Mark, you mentioned the upcoming webinar series that starts next Tuesday. We're going to be focusing on those things a lot in that webinar. So we're going to be looking at privacy, we're going to be looking at strategy rather, how to establish your strategy at the school. We're going to be talking about policy, and we're going to talk a little bit about governance, but we're doing it in a really practical way for school leaders. Like, when you get off that webinar as a leader, what's the next thing you're going to do? And we're going to give you those kind of that kind of framework and the resources to help as well. So
jobs to be done. Jobs to be done.
Exactly, jobs to be done. Exactly. So that's one of the things that we're going to be concentrating on there. So if anybody's more interested in that, then we'd love to see you next week.
One of the things I think that when we were discussing earlier, the way that you've described what you should be planning for at the moment as a school leader, there are three words you used: visibility, clarity, and control. And wherever you are in the world, on the visibility, the way that my notes, I've got reading from my notes here, is visibility, understanding how AI is being used across the school, both within at a enterprise level, but also on the shadow level. And they're clearly appreciating that shadow AI is going to be there, right? Without going, this is a big problem. Clarity, which is with you, you've described setting expectations around appropriate use, implementing policy, and communicating it early. And I know that one of the topics of the 3 35-minute sessions is around stakeholder engagement and engagement with parents, engagement with students, engagement with staff, and lastly, controls, which is creating safer and guided ways to use it. And I think if you just know, as a leader, if you just think about those 3 words, what's important? Visibility, clarity, control, right? That should aid your thinking and discussions around moving away from this feeling of paralysis at a very operational level, before you get to like the strategic components of what we're doing. I'd really be interested to hear, Julia, like in the next playbook, a bit more around, are vendors really adapting their contracts to take consideration of these changing regulations? Are they actually, because fundamentally the EU AI Act places significant obligations. From a litigation perspective in the US, there are responsibilities that you as a school have, that if you do not comply, you can be litigated against. But that's even before you get into things like FERPA and COPPA. And I'm really interested to understand whether there's going to be any step change, any change whatsoever in the next playbook. So if you would mind taking that away and let's have that as a discussion, because I think it's a really, really important one, and I think it's something that's going to really, as we get into the new academic year, cause a lot of problems with schools. So Dan and Julia, we've got we're taking the playbook live next month. We are, for those of you who haven't seen, we are running the playbook live as a one-day event at the United Nations International School in New York City, April the 10th. There are tickets still available. Dan, what are you most looking forward to today? About the day?
Yeah, I'm excited for us to come together in person I know we're going to have some of our previous guests join us in person as well. So Saba, who we interviewed for the first playbook, will be joining us. I'm excited to have, I suppose, the people who we talk to every month in the room as well, and leaders and educators from around the United States join us and actually get into some of these questions in depth, but also actually it not just be a conference where someone listens to a few talks, but actually we craft something, we craft a way forward, we actually contribute to that playbook idea and kind of what we've been talking about today, really. Look at how do we grant permission and what are those next steps.
One of the things that's, I know it's very US specific, and it's very independent schools lens, but we have the main players from the accreditation commissions. And if you're unfamiliar with the accreditation, because you're not in the US, they are like the Ofsted. They are like they're not inspection, but they sort of play that sort of role in the US. And we have a panel of the key players in accreditation talking about AI and accreditation and what it essentially means. And in the UK, that would be like having Ofsted on stage going, okay, AI and inspection, how does it affect your protectionist racket for inspection? It's those, and I'm really interested in that. And then I don't know whether we're quite there yet, Dan, but we may have some key enterprise players coming to have a conversation around how they see their platforms evolving given the practical concerns of the people in the room. And our role is to really create that conversation and have people go away. But do we think that's going to happen? And how do we think?
I suppose. We're still we're pulling on contacts, and it looks like we're going to have some representatives from these big tech companies, the biggest tech companies out there creating this AI in the room. And I think that's going to be really important because it's not just educators, leaders, accreditation professionals coming together, but it's the people who are at the frontier of this technology as well. And we want everyone in the room to have a 360 view on this, so we can make those informed next decisions. So yeah, exciting to we're still working on it. We're still confirming with a few of them, but to have some of those guys in the room, I think it's going to be really beneficial.
So anyone outside the UK, if you fancy a trip to outside the US, if you fancy a trip to New York City, then get a ticket and come along with it. It's all about independent conversation that isn't informed by any third party motivation that's around creating the dialogue. And I think Dan, that you described, breaking the barriers between those different audiences that are all seeking to do the right thing. And if it works well in New York, it'd be great to bring it to some other locations as well. We're out of time. I can't believe it's almost been an hour. It's been I think it's been a great conversation, Dan. I think that's hopefully people are leaving this episode with some key takeaways around how to move forward, and understand, like, when we come to the next episode, Julie is hopefully talking about whether what edtech vendors are doing. I suppose just to leave people with something, Dan, what is your outlook for things moving so fast? What's your outlook for the next month? Do you foresee? We've seen so many announcements and big changes. Is there anything else possibly that could be announced that could be groundbreaking or move the dial in a different direction?
Well, I think we're going to see, like we mentioned before, from January, we started to see these new capabilities of agentic AI completing full workflows. I think we're going to start to see that in a more robust way from the more commercial companies. So we've already heard last week that Copilot are putting a co-work agentic feature into their products. It's still very early days, probably won't get into education for quite a while, but I think and we saw the company behind ChatGPT, OpenAI, literally bought that open source model we talked about, ClaudeBot, and hired the developer who did it as well. So I think we'll probably see them incorporate that capability. So I think we probably won't be there in a month, but I think we're going to start to see more of a shift towards that kind of generative AI 1.0, talking to a chatbot, getting answers from a chatbot, to kind of the next iteration, which is going to be this AI starting to do more full workflows for us. I think that's what we're moving into now.
Brilliant. And with that, I'll wrap up and thank everyone for joining live. Thank you for watching on demand, and stay tuned for the next episode the live episode in April, and then the next live on demand session. So thanks for joining. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.